MUB meeting to order this morning. First things on the list are approval of agenda. Ron?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Okay, second thing is minutes.
Make a motion to approve.
Okay. Don't have to say.
I second. Yeah.
You'll second it?
both.
Yeah.
Okay, claims.
I had one question on the claims. Just want to know what that $13,000 for tank maintenance. What was that used for?
That's our contract with Suez.
That's a contract with Suez, and then they just come in and that's their inspection contract and all that. Okay, and that'll take us through the whole year, or okay.
The year? That's an annual payment.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was my only question.
Okay.
I'd make a motion to approve the claims if anyone doesn't have any other comments or questions.
No. I'll second.
Make a motion.
He did.
I did.
And I second.
Approved. City Finance.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So this will be your fourth quarter report. This is pretty much where it'll be at once the auditors look at it. And of course, the auditors always might look at it and find something they need to change. But this is where we're at the end of 2021. Basically, you guys have about $3,044,000. Most of that is in that advanced other, but of course there's still cash there, actual cash there. So, but this kind of breaks it down the three places. The only thing that's missing is your deposits. But that deposits really are not ours, so I don't list them. Let's see, what is there in deposits? There's about $170,000 in deposits that we have on hand, but they don't really belong to us, so I'm not listing them. So if we'll go to the second page, which is your balance sheet. And basically, there is your accounts receivable. You have $119,000 in your accounts receivable, which would be your water bills that are waiting to be paid. The advance, there's your advances, and then the last items from land down is all your assets. So there's the accumulated depreciation there too. So that means that you'd take that off of whatever your assets are. Then that would give you your actual at what you have. So you have $19 million worth of assets, but you need to take $6 million off because that's the depreciation expense on them.
Do we carry, like our water lines?
Yes.
Carry them as an asset?
Yep, that's what the one that's called improve other than buildings.
Yeah.
That's at $19 million.
Okay.
Yep, anything there. And they probably didn't start doing this right away, so we've got some of the older lines on there. So this probably does not, there for a while. I believe back in 1999, somewhere in there is when they started keeping track of the assets. And so I'm not sure how far back Pauline went to actually get those, to pick up everything. But anything new is definitely in there.
And that includes all the pipes, pumps.
Yep, anything the project, yeah. So a project went through, the project gets put in there.
Okay.
Yeah. And so your equipment, your buildings, and then your equipment.
Well, that doesn't include the buildings. The buildings was what?
Those two up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess it includes the
What buildings do we still own and, per se?
Water, the well buildings.
Oh, those are well houses,
buildings,
well
houses, yep.
All right.
So that little building on the south end of
South
town,
shop.
that's a shop?
It's, I don't know, do we have that listed as water or is that listed under the city?
Yeah, I'm not sure where it's
I think
listed
for your buildings are pretty much all your pump houses.
Pump houses and that.
Yeah.
And that's $181,000.
Right. So your big building is within that 19 million.
Okay.
Then we drop down to our liabilities. That is just stuff that came in January that was actually December stuff. So that's just the 16,000. It's just an accounting thing. The biggest one on here is if you drop down to the two last numbers, that's what you guys owe on your loans. So you've got 1.3 and a 2.8 there.
And those are the remaining 2 loans that we have on the water system.
Correct. That would be your Lizelle Street, and then the other one would be the big project that we had with the water well and stuff back. What was it, about 5-6 years? No, probably longer than that. 5-6 years.
That was from rural development, right?
Yep, real development loan. So that's your balance sheet, and then if you skip, there's the ending one. That's just a. So then we want to go to page 4. That is your revenues. We really did come really close on your revenues as far as budget-wise. I think that is about as close as we've been in a long time. You're just off $7,900, so we did a good guess on that budget for that revenue. So you had the 1.7 million come in, and we had budgeted 1.759. So, any questions on that?
I don't think that when we did the budget, we hadn't anticipated lowering the utility rates.
Oh,
So we
really did probably
really
better.
did really good.
Yep, actually we did better. Yeah, I don't think we did either because that was a January thing. Yeah,
Well, that's good.
it is.
Yeah, it's sharpening your pencil there, Ken.
And then the next page would be your expenses, and you can see that we actually were way below budget as far as expenses did. So we did very well this past year. Rick and his staff did real well.
Well, yeah.
So had 392,000.
Almost $400,000 just saved, right?
And of course, a project isn't. We're constantly putting money in, the capital improvements, and then we don't do anything. We're trying to build that money up. So this can go to, when we start doing, more lines.
Some of that was due to the ongoing problem we're seeing of the delay in getting meters and census points, and so even though we ordered them last year, we haven't received them yet, so we haven't paid for them yet.
That's a big discrepancy, $171,000.
That's not a lot of meters, though.
Yeah. Well, yeah, those big meters cost a lot, don't they?
Yeah. We had some really large orders in there, like for the Davenport project and for the Hidden Hills.
Yeah.
Some of those were delayed, and we didn't actually get them till past the first year. So then, of course, they got to be paid out of this year's.
Correct. So, are there any questions? And like I've always told you, you guys, I know that you don't get them till now. If you see things you want to talk about, please give me a call or stop by, because we can sure discuss anything that you see, and we can look at it in depth if you want more information.
What's operating transfers out?
Those are transfers that are in the budget. We transfer money into the general fund.
So stuff like that.
Yeah, let's see where.
Well, we transfer to the general fund so it can go to SEDC and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Thanks.
And probably the end of April, I'll have you the third quarter for this year. So we're hoping anyway.
I suppose we should thank our superintendent and Rick for staying within budget, huh? Good job.
Being under budget.
Huh? Under budget, yes. It's great.
He's going to be asking Daniel for a little help there.
No, I think we'll end up spending it. We've got some good projects coming up, so.
Good.
Customers' concerns? Everybody's happy out in the audience? Water superintendent?
I'll try to be brief. So I've been corresponding with Jack Pine Gypsies. Things are going well, I believe. I've got some part list. That sounds like they are going to be ordering the materials. We are, I believe we're gaining ground really well in that category. Obviously, last month we didn't meet because it was a wonderful, wonderful day out that particular day. We spent a few days in the cold, digging holes in wet ground. Down here by the school, by the middle school, we actually had one leak we found and fixed. At the end of the day, we found a bonus leak at the other end of our long hole, so we were able to take care of two in one spot there. That was good. The one at exit 32 was, well, we haven't had that bill yet, so you were talking budget, but we had to hire a contractor. That particular line is 22 to 25 feet deep. I didn't have a really good spot to get a measurement, so I went off of the excavator's guess on how deep he could reach. So kind of a scary spot that one is.
I think if you remember, I don't recall the exact date either, Todd. It was we had a leak in that same spot here
a couple years
3 or 4 years ago. Yes. So, and actually, same contractor was able. We were able to utilize
Close to
it.
that same.
We did not find, actually, as he got down to it and remembered, there's a huge box culvert there. The one a few years ago was on the west side of the box culvert. This time we were on the east side of the box culvert. We had to have been getting very close to where it started running up to normal depth, but it was still extremely deep.
Why would it be so deep? Because of the construction of the interstate?
Yep.
And there's an 8-foot box culvert that we have to run under. So the box culvert is obviously at grade, and we were 5.5 feet or 6 feet below the box culvert to try to avoid ground heave is what I'm assuming. And the leak on that line is just likely poor manufacture on that piece of ductile iron. The 10, 12 feet that were exposed it was in exceptional condition, except for about 12 inches where a hole blew out about the size of a baseball or softball.
That's a big leak.
Yeah, well, yes. I actually called Rick on that morning that we found it because I looked at skate at home and like, man, Rick, something's going on. Is there a fire? And he was able to find the leak, and we were able to finally isolate it. But it's kind of ironic how it was just one little piece that was bad. Other than that, our two big developments are, I don't know if you've been down to Garden Grove. There's a lot of activity there, a lot of concrete. I do have meters for both Garden Grove and Hidden Hills now. I have the materials we need to meter them as they build them, so we're ahead of the game for once there. At Hidden Hills, Hidden Estates, the connector is getting very close to having the contractor has a piping nearly laid. We're still waiting on the booster, which should be coming. The deadlines keep or the time frames keep changing, but I think we're fairly close to on schedule as of the last known date. But they're also pouring foundations up there, so we're going to be running through town doing inspections like crazy this summer. That's my report, unless you have questions.
Sounds good.
No, and I'd just follow up on what Todd said. The latest update we got on the booster station skid, 2 pumps, actually, 2 of our pumps shipped today. We've got the 2 VFDs will actually ship on the 31st, and then the transfer switch ships on the 11th of April. So they need to have those components. Those will go to Mitchell. They'll install them. When that skid comes, it'll be a complete building that just basically gets set on the foundation, and they hook the pipe up. So pretty quick. I think if I remember right, our completion date for that project was like April 25th. So we're going to be right in that time frame. Not a significant delay. Although we are seeing some activities up at Hidden Hills, I don't foresee that they're going to need water before we have it ready. They're just now putting in service lines and doing some foundation work. So they've likely got, 45 to 60 days of work before they'll be ready to turn on water. So again, I think we're sitting pretty good pretty good up there. A couple of the other things, and you'll notice that Aaron Jordan is in the audience. He's the chairman of our infrastructure committee. We've been having a lot of discussions at infrastructure committee on new developments, and probably one of the bigger ones is the rest of that property going up on Avalanche Road. There's, looking at it, we have the potential of probably 400 to 500 homes up there. That's been one of the things that we've seen in the news lately, is that development up there. It's still in its very preliminary stages, so we're still going back and forth, looking at plans and master layouts and things like that. We don't necessarily have anything concrete at this point in time, but we're working with those developers to ensure that we have adequate water, sewer. Probably when we look at those projects, we're going to have some significant improvements made, some redundancy. We're going to loop in that water coming down off of the north tank, upsize that line, do some things. That sewer line will actually probably run along the north side of Bear Butte Creek all the way down to the football field where we put in our new interceptor line. So we've got some big projects in the works for that development to ensure that we can provide adequate services to that. Like I said, everything is kind of just in the initial stages at this point in time. If you remember, we did put in an application for the ARPA money for the state revolving loan fund. We put in an application, both one for clean water and one for the sewer side. So likely we'll be moving forward with those probably in June. Will be the next water board date that we'll probably try and shoot for. And I think they'll have everything. There's still a little bit of uncertainty on how everything's going to work out. And every day they're getting that hammered out. I can't remember. Do you remember, Ted, off the top of your head, how many millions of dollars was injected into that fund? Yeah, 600 million. So there's going to be a lot of projects vying for that money. So hopefully we get our applications in and we receive a portion of that as well. One of the other projects we're currently working on, I've been working with Ted from Foth Engineering. They're going to be doing the design work on the East Main and East Sherman. That's going to be everything from Nellie to the east up into the cemetery. Of course, we're going to be redoing the roads, sidewalks, ADA improvements, and along with that, we're going to replace water and sewer lines. So that'll be a big project that probably spans over the next several years. We'll have to phase that project in a manner that we can get part of it done in 1 year, and then of course the rally will have to shut down and then start work back up. We haven't quite gotten to the point where we've decided whether we'll try and encourage to have multiple crews on site and do it, or if we'll just stagger it as like a phase 1, phase 2 project. But that'll be a very, very big project, trying to put in those new mains and tie in everybody's existing hookups and make everything work. So it's a project that is direly needed.
Yeah, the street is in bad shape.
It is. And with that, we'll get rid of those, we'll be adding the storm sewer. We'll get rid of those dips in the road as well. So those are kind of some of the bigger things. We continue to work. I need to get a property owner meeting scheduled here for our Pine Glen project. I think that one we're about 95% ready to go on that. We did advertise as well. Actually, we're advertising this week for the Dolan Creek and Ferguson Drive project that was tied with assisted living. That'll be rebuilding some of that. Not necessarily water lines. Ferguson Drive will have some water lines on it. We'll have some abandonments done off of Moose, but for the most part, those are road and sidewalk projects and some storm sewer. But busy time. So I'll just, like I said, briefly kind of touch on those. And I did ask at the infrastructure committee, a lot of our talk had been centered around the proposed purchase of the Richards property and the Lakeside Adventure Park. And of course, with that, there was a lot of questions concerning water availability, water quality. So we've been working a lot with Ted on that too, and he actually drafted a very nice report. We heard that here a couple of weeks ago at the infrastructure committee, and I asked him to come and kind of give a synopsis of that report to you guys as well, because it covered kind of, generally speaking, our whole entire water system and the state of where we're at with our water system. So we've got him scheduled to give that report under new business. Probably take about a half hour or so. So with that, we're going to be quiet and move on down the agenda and let him talk about our water system.
That one water line up there, is that Ferguson Drive? That's by where Anderson's developing?
Right.
Will
Yep.
that go in this summer?
No. That's Pine Glen. That goes up at the end of Murray.
Yeah, where it goes
That's
up.
Pine Glen. Ferguson is the one where it dead ends by the assisted living to the right.
Okay. What about the other one where it goes up past the front like Robin?
Yeah, that's Pine Glen.
Okay. Will that be done this summer then, or when are you proposing that one?
Possibly.
Sure. And the street will go about that same time, right behind.
Right.
Okay, thank you. No public hearings? Old business? I don't think we have any old business, do we? New business? Mouth engineering? Water system? That's this big report.
Well, welcome, Mr. Schultz.
Welcome back.
Thanks for having me today. I'm Schultz with Full Engineering. So I met most of you, but I've worked with a lot of you over the years. I've done a lot of water system work in Sturgis since the 1990s. So kind of back here to give you a little bit of an update on. All right. Ted Schultz with Foth. And what I would like to do is just talk to you today about the water demands, and it's a little bit of a history lesson on your water wells and your distribution system storage, and how the Lakeside Adventure Park might affect demand in the coming years if that's accepted and moves forward. So with that, I've got a short report here, and I'll try to hit the highlights of it. And if you have any questions, we can kind of try to get those as we go, or we can wait till the end if it works. So we looked at the CRS report along with Fennel and that architecture group on the Lakeside Adventure Park. We looked at what the area was proposed for a 3-acre lake, depth of 4 to 12 feet, and we looked at how much water that would require to fill. And so we're looking at 3 to 3.5 million gallons of water to fill that lake. And with that, we have annual pan evaporation. So that pan evaporation for Sturgis is about 55 inches a year. So if we just have open water, we're going to lose about 55 inches at the top of that water level every year. So we need to recoup that, refill that. And, with their proposed splash pad wibbits, those water features that take water and spray water, that actually helps the situation because we can daily refill the lake. As the evaporation happens, you're basically refilling the lake at the same time. So with that demand is about 4 million gallons a year. And so we're looking at with, some contingency, some irrigation for lawn, area around the lake, in the upwards of 9 million gallons per year, primarily in those summer months of, May through September time period. With that, our maximum demands are going to be in the 100 to 160 gallons per minute range. And so with that, we have a few choices on where to get that water. So that's what this report really looks at is what kind of situation is the city water system in, and what would be the maybe most optimistic or the most efficient way to provide water here. So with that, we're looking at 100 to 150 gallons per minute, as I mentioned, and looking at the lakeside area around exit 32. I'm going to get right into some of the alternatives we looked at. Number one was, basically don't do any improvements, use the existing city water system, connect to the line that's there. We actually have a line in Van Acker Canyon Drive there that could be connected to. So we did look at that. We also are going to look at city well number 4. It's a well over by McDonald's that has the high sediment and sand, and some issues with that. And then possibly a new well at the site, at the Richards property. And then 4th would be a new recreation well at the Richards property, meaning smaller, Minnelusa recreational, smaller diameter well that would be solely only for the lakeside property. And then possibly using city dams and pipeline. So we'll go through that. And with that, I revisited several reports, looked at your recent demands. Your recent city water demands have been in that 2.8 million gallons per day range in the summer months. So we see that in late July usually. The last couple of weeks of July is your peak time period. And we also looked at what is the short-term forecast for growth. We're looking at new developments, new annexed areas. And so with that, we looked at about another 1 million gallons a day of annexed area, additional growth. And I think that happens over about a 20-year span. There's variable time periods on that. It could happen as fast as 10 years, but more likely we probably are approaching that towards 20 years. So as development grows, as the economy changes, that will be affected. With that, we're looking at the Lakeside Park is going to take about 100,000 gallons per day. So with that, we're looking at, I think overall, you use about 365 million gallons per year. And so 9 out of that 365 it's really a small number in the big scheme of things. But we do need to plan for it and make sure that we have the adequate water. All right, so some of the choices that we have here. Well, I'm going to go through the wells. Well number 1, drilled in 2013. So it's been about 10 years since that major project with well 1 and well 3, a lot of distribution lines, and then later Lozelle Street. And so that well is operating in at 400, 450 gallons per minute range, and a good Madison well. Well number 2 is the well that is, it's up near Cleveland Street, right off the interstate, up in that, it's exact that neighborhood. What do you refer to that neighborhood as? But anyway, but it's a place that you don't get to unless you're really focused on getting there, right? So that well has been installed since
over here.
Kind of straight across from the jet.
Yeah.
Since about 1950. So that well is approaching 72 years old. Okay, and so it's pretty old well. Based on my report here, I'm assuming that well we're going to phase out in about 8 years. Okay, so at about 80 years old, and that could happen sooner or later. But based on casing, corrosion, things of that nature, 75 years and up is a long lifespan. All right, well number 4 is the Minnelusa well. The city has a permit to only operate it in the 4 months in the summer, and it's about 380 gallons per minute, but it has a high sand content, and it has a sand separator filter on it that honestly does not adequately take out the sand and work properly. And so to use that well would take some improvements. And right now I don't think that well's been online for a couple of years, Todd. So that well is essentially a kind of an emergency backup well right now, and without some more improvements there, not really available for normal use. Well 3 is about 55 years old. There were some refurbishments done in 2012, and that's where we do have a booster station in that facility also, and that well is currently operating satisfactory. Well 5 and 6 are Minnelusa wells in Industrial Park, very close together, about 2,000 feet apart. And so some of the issues that those two wells have are they're very close together, and so when they operate, they actually lower the cone of depression for each other. And we also have only one 8-inch line where we're just, the distribution is going into one single line. So we're really limited, and a lot of times we're probably not seeing both wells operating efficiently. We're seeing 1.25, 1.5, wells operating there. So there could be some improvements done with the distribution system in that area, but essentially that, and there also is some sand that comes with 6. Well 6 does have some sand in it also. So the more you pump those Minnelusa wells, the more the sand comes, it seems like. So it seems like what happens there. Well 7, drilled in 2003, one of your best wells, over 600 gallons per minute, producing good water there. So that's kind of the summary of the wells. So kind of put them in different categories. Well 1 and 7 are high quality, high producing. Wells 2 and 4 are concerned due to age and sediment and issues there. Well 3 is okay, average, and then well 5 and 6 are limited due to that proximity I talked about. So with that, due to the current demand, we're going to look at your ability to supply that demand and the forecasted demand. We'll start to look at that on the next page. So if you see that chart in the middle of the page, production with no new wells. So if we lost well 4 and well 2, we would drop our production, and our demand continues to climb, right? So that's the concern, I think, and this board is proactive in looking at, the future of the system at all times. So I think now is a good time to reassess and look where you're headed and the condition of your wells. You can see the age on the right column on that top chart. We're talking about wells from 17 years to 80 years old by the time 2030 comes. So one of the other things that we'd like to do based on AWWA recommendations is to look at wells for your system with one of your firm capacity wells out of service. So meaning you have one well out of service, and at times, I think, Todd, in the last 6 months, you've had 2 or 3 wells out of service at times. Is that true?
Counting 4, yes.
Okay. So, I think that's realistic to assume that, with 7, 8 wells that you have one that, could be down at any one time, right? The other thing that we can't really necessarily count on is to pump those wells at 24 hours a day continuously forever. That lowers the aquifers and really not ideal situations for that. We'll end up reducing our pumping capacity over time. So with that, we looked at what would happen if we added 1 or 2 wells. Wells in this vicinity in the Madison Aquifer are generally in the 400 to 500 gallon per minute range. And with that, we could, increase production. And looking at the chart here, we're looking at operating 20 hours a day. We could be at 3 million gallons a day, currently up to 3.5 million gallons a day with 2 new wells. So those are the kind of numbers that we're looking at. You're in that 2.8 MGD demand position right now, and you're in that about 3 million gallons of available supply right now. So you have a little buffer, and we like to keep that 10 to 25% buffer in there to make sure that we can meet that demand. With that, we got some feedback that I think we'll look at a 20-year growth, as we talked about. I just mentioned 20 years. So if we add 1 well in a year or 2 or 3, that would help take care of any deficiencies we're seeing. And another well could be needed based on growth, based on demand here in the next 5, 10, 15 years. So those are the kind of things that I think we should be looking out. And I think this is something you should revisit every year, and making sure that as we grow in Sturgis, that you can provide the water demand that's needed. All right. With those alternatives, I'll kind of summarize them. Number one was, utilize the existing city system. It is possible, but it would not be recommended on a long-term basis, just due to the additional water demand there. Number two was to upgrade the city well number 4, and that could be a variety of things. It could be a new filter system. It could be redrilling a Madison well in that same spot. It's currently a Minnelusa or a Minnelusa-Madison mix. And so we could re-drill that well in that same position. So there's some options there in well number 4, but right now it's not currently used. Well number 8 I'm calling would be on the Richards property at the Lakeside site. And in the 2009 study that I wrote, we actually recommended a well number 8 within close proximity to that same location that this would end up on the Richards property. So it fits your long-term plan, it fits your goals, and now would be the kind of optimum time to secure land, secure a well spot for that, and be able to connect it to the distribution system. With that well, we could be able to pump to multiple pressure zones. So we could pump to your primary high-level zone, and then we could also pump to a higher zone that's planned out Van Acker Canyon Drive there, above the winery. And so that option is a great thing because we can pump the 2 different pressure zones and also include a PRV possibly in that station and a variety of things that gives you a lot of flexibility for the future. It could also fill that future storage tank, which is planned in that same southwest area, so it's nice to have one tank and one well at least on every pressure zone, so you have a supply for that pressure zone. And with that, the location we looked at, we would like to have a half a mile of separation from other wells, so we'd be a half mile from well 1 and 3. It would be a similar well to well number 1 as far as depth goes and possible production, although it's as Ron knows probably, it's not always guaranteed, right? But
Crapshoot.
yeah. But I think historically we have a good handle on the wells in the Madison Aquifer around the area. So optimistically, I think it's in that 400 to 500 gallon per minute range.
Yeah, and that wouldn't have to be as deep as well number 1 either, if it's out there, maybe.
It'd be similar, but maybe not quite as deep. You're right.
Yeah.
So with that, some advantages for that option. I think it helps the city system, and I think it also helps the adventure park there. We could set up the system to actually run untreated water right to the lake, so that we didn't have to chlorinate or do anything there. We actually set up the controls so that it would fill the lake and or operate that system efficiently without any treatment. So we could save money on that as well. The next option was to drill a new recreation well for that site, meaning a Madison well that's shallower, smaller diameter, maybe in that 150, 200 gallon per minute range. And that would just satisfy the lakeside property. So with that, it would be a lower cost, but it would also be only for that property. And when you start looking at the cost to drill a well and the potential for sand in the Minnelusa aquifer, there is some risk there. So you could end up with some sediment in that well. You could end up with some issues there where you could drill that well and then still end up with some sediment, and not sure that equipment, how that would work with the spray pads and things of that nature. So I think in the end, that is a lower cost option, but I think in my recommendation, it's a lower on the pole there because of that. I do not recommend that we, just do that solely without considering at least, benefit to the rest of the city system. Just the operational aspect of it too is that, there's a lot of efficiencies gathered with, putting the new well in the SCADA system and being able to control it, understand the pressures, and be able to run that remotely. So that would be an advantage too. And the city dams option was considered. So there's a 2017 School of Mines report, and that report evaluated the dams and essentially said that they were in need of quite a lot of expensive repairs if they're going to be, maintained as a dam. And so there were some recommendations to use one of them as a pass-through, essentially, and some other recommendations there. And with that, they looked at the water quality. And the water quality in those dams is higher in E. coli than the swimming standards by EPA and DANR. So, there are some concerns with that water would come down and wouldn't be usable, would need some treatment if we were to use it. And disinfection and filtration and some other things would be needed on that. So along with the pipeline, it's currently broken. The valves aren't operational. I think some of them are over 100 years old, possibly. So those valves are not currently operating satisfactory either. And so with that, there'd be a tremendous amount of pipeline and dam work, I think, to really make this feasible, along with the filtering of the water. So, and could we guarantee that we would have water at all times? Most likely, but it's a little bit reliant on the upstream water, and also the water quality. If we get a storm event, it could be low, dirty water, right? Low quality water. So with that, just 2.3 miles of pipe, to feasibly get to the site, so it's quite a distance as well. So with that, I think it scores the lowest on my recommendation list as far as using the dams as an option. And with that, we can kind of summarize that the strongest recommendation was for a new well number 8 at the site, followed by a possible new recreation well at the site. So those are probably the two that are higher on the list. Well number 4, filtration, could also be considered, and that could be considered independently of this lakeside property or not. So if the board wants to, have that pursued, that could be investigated as well. So with that, I can answer any questions you might have.
Dollars and cents wise, the wells are better than bringing a dam water in.
Yeah, I think that in the end, with the new pipeline and actually probably requiring some dam improvements to guarantee that we have water.
Back here, yeah.
Well, yeah, and there's, I guess the standard for swimming has coliform requirements, and if you're not already meeting the coliform requirements in the water at the dams,
Yeah.
it's probably not going to meet the swimming requirements for
Right. Without treatment.
without filtration or whatever. Yeah. So what about the new number 9? Where would that, if you went with a new number 9, where would that be?
Yeah, we have in the 2009 report laid out wells 9, 10, and 11 across the city, and I believe that's to the west, kind of the west of that Dome Creek area is where 9 is, but we recommended a few future wells also.
Okay. And then I had a question on your graph I'm not sure what page it is. It's right below where it's the 3rd page or 4th. No, it's about the 6th page. Sturgis water supply, that graph there. You've got basically, you've got the line with 2 new wells, but the projected demand is still lower than those 2 new wells bring until you get all the way out to 2030.
Right. And that was what I was talking about with the growth here. We're jumping from 2.8 to 3.8 million gallons a day in demand, and I think what we should do is look at that over a 20-year span.
Oh, okay. That's assuming more growth than we're probably
it is. Yeah, that's an aggressive growth pattern there.
Thank you.
Well, good. I'd like to take time to read through it. And if I have any questions, maybe I'll give you a call or
Absolutely.
something. Okay.
All right.
We'll put
Thanks,
this
Jeff.
out on our website as well.
Okay.
So that if anybody watching wants to see the report.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ted.
Interesting. More dollars. I think Faye told us that reserve wouldn't last very long, didn't she?
Where is the city at with the water park?
Well, Daniel, you want to give an update after, based on last night? And yeah, Daniel.
Last night, the city council authorized the mayor to sign a purchase agreement with the Richards Trust for the 77 acres, which was a site that Ted kind of reviewed in there. And so with that, today we are sending out a request for proposals to see what the interest level is from developers to build some retail, commercial, as well as housing on that site, because that truly is kind of the next step to see what the interest level is, to see if there would be enough taxes generated from that new development to actually construct the waterfront park. So that's something that is being done today. We'll send out the RFPs probably in about 3-4 hours. And then that has, I think, 3 or 4 week time limit to have those submitted from interested developers. And then from that, the council will weigh what the submission is. There'll be some public interaction and hopefully choose a potential developer. And then with that, whoever that potential developer is, there would be several meetings to interact with the public to get their comments on a proposed design for the entire neighborhood. So not just the water park, but also the retail as well as the residential and everything else. And once there's kind of a preferred alternative, then that would be presented along with a preliminary and then a final plat, and also a TIF. And so that could take a couple of months, or it could take a year, depending on how long it takes to really figure out what that development should look like. So it's proceeding forward, but by no means is it at the point of yes, it's going to be built. It's another step forward in a long process to make sure it's as good of a project as can be for the community of Sturgis.
Is there going to be any kind of geotechnical study or anything like that to determine how the geology works in all of this?
Yes, and the owners of the property did do a geotechnical survey. I think it was in October. Yeah, last year they did one. There were several test sites that were done with that, and from that it actually was determined that the gypsum actually isn't nearly as deep as what, or
because I think that was always a
thick,
concern.
yeah.
Over there.
Absolutely, because you see it on some of the tops of some of the ridges, but most of the drill sites showed that was really where it was.
Okay.
It wasn't nearly as prevalent as what it would appear to be. Yeah. And so with that, there's definitely been a lot of increased interest in development on that site.
So if that's going to go and everything, so then by the time that lake is ready for water, we have to have a new well in, because is there a
No.
place we can bring water to it?
Yes, and so that's what that analysis showed, that long term, we should have another well to replace some of our existing wells, as well as to provide water for future growth, including the waterfront adventure park. But there is enough capacity at this point to do that. But part of this larger development would, include a new well site. Now, if that well site is built the first year or maybe year 2, it doesn't necessarily matter. It's just going to be a portion of the phase of
We don't have to
development.
have it before they can have the lake.
No, yeah,
Because we can bring it from across the street.
correct. Yeah, there's enough existing capacity to be able to fill and maintain it. But long term, as we look at phasing out some of our older wells, we will need wells to replace the ones that we're phasing out.
And maybe you should talk to them a little bit about House Bill 1033.
Yes, and so there was there were two different large funding streams that that the legislature has funded. One was through the state revolving loan program. I forgot the total amount, but that was statewide. But several cities put in for funding for that, and the city of Sturgis was one of the entities that did. And they provided us a 30 some percent grant. And that's going to be to help pay for the water improvements that are going to be at the development along Avalanche Road and the water line and sewer extensions for that development. So that's fantastic. That about 30% of that will be paid for.
Up to 30%.
Yeah,
We haven't got any yet.
not all of it. It's still working its way through the state government, but there's been an allocation towards the city for that. So that's great news with that. The next round was authorized by the legislature, and it's House Bill 1033. The governor has not signed it as far as I have heard yet, but it's on our desk along with several other bills that they're looking at whether or not to approve. This bill was part of the governor's proposed budget, which was $200 million to assist in water and wastewater infrastructure for new developments. Just given the explosion in demand for housing in South Dakota, there's obviously a need for additional infrastructure so that we can ensure that there's decent housing at all sorts of levels. We need to increase the supply of housing. And one of the hurdles to increasing the supply of housing is the high cost of infrastructure. So the state put together $200 million of funding to assist local governments in providing the infrastructure at new developments. And so this project would allow the city to apply for that funding through the state. That's $100 million for loans, low interest loans, and then $100 million for grants. You're not required to ask for both or either one. It's just whatever you would necessarily want to apply for. There's 30% of that is reserved for Rapid City and Sioux Falls. The other 70% is for communities outside of Rapid City and Sioux Falls. And so this project, a new well there, as well as a new tank that we would be looking at, we would anticipate applying for that financing for all of that. And what the program is that the city would provide a third of the financing, the developer would provide a third, and then the state would provide a third. So it could be up to a 33% loan or grant and loan funds. And so it's a fantastic program that, frankly, the state very rarely has ever provided any financing, especially grant financing, of anywhere near this size. So this would be a tremendous project that would really fit exactly what they're looking at, which is growth for new housing, growth for recreation, and growth for commercial retail. So this fits the governor's chiefs of staff's description of the ideal projects to a T.
Thank you.
We're springing into the future here,
Yeah.
and it's spring.
Perfect.
Okay, anything else? Other matters to come before the board this morning? Excuse me, I want to thank everybody for the reports. Very good.
Ken, I'm just going to mention something. I don't know if we've mentioned it to Rick yet. We're thinking about, we spend a lot of time. There's a couple things that could happen. We've been approached by another company other than Express Bill Pay, which Express Bill Pay is what our utility, we can go in and pay and they take care of all that stuff. We've been approached from another one. We're actually going to, I believe it's tomorrow, have a webcam showing what they can do. But anyway, they take on the part of getting hold of people when they're late. They take a whole, they push for people to not pay with a check or cash. They kind of push them towards the website. And so we would not be saving money on that, but they would be doing a lot of what we do right now, which between Jen and Elaine, they spend hours calling people trying to get this money. So we are looking at that. So I may bring that forward to you guys. I like Express Bill Pay. They have been awesome, but this group sounds like they could go way above, beyond, above what Express Bill Pay does, and would help us with our tasks. And it seems like it just never goes away. We are constantly trying to get people to pay.
They'd be able to just pick up the existing Express Bill Pay people and just transfer it right into them, so that it'd be seamless for those people.
Yep, it would just be a different, yeah.
Okay.
So, and like I said, I'm just barely learning. We've only had one phone call, but we do have a webinar, and I'm going to have everyone sit in on this webinar. And so I don't know, but I just want to kind of warn you that I might come to you and kind of show you what they can do. So, thank you.
Good morning.
Thanks. Ted, before you leave, I'd like to get your cards in case I have any question. I'll give you a call.
Okay. No other matters to come before the board, no executive session required. Motion to
I
adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.